The game takes place in a conflict zone between UFLL and APR, in what appears to be some country in Africa. Mercenary is sent with a mission to kill the Jackal, man responsible for arming both sides. Driver takes him to Hotel Pala, and on the way we can feel the climate of a civil war going on. Before they reach the place, Mercenary feels some weird fever and passes out in a car. He wakes up in a room seeing someone going through his stuff. Turns out, it's the Jackal himself. He can kill the guy who was after him, but instead, he just tells him that since he failed his mission to kill him and end up with the malaria instead, he won't get paid, and since that's his only motivation as a mercenary, he doesn't have to worry anymore and he just leaves the room. Mercenary passes out and is waken up earlier by the noises of gunfiring. The place is already on fire, so he grabs what he can and escapes. He tries to fight his way through the streets to reach safety but gets shot and falls. Luckily for him, someone picks him up. He wakes up and meets Cuepo, who tells him since he killed some of his men back in the hotel, now he is working for him. He tells him he works for a local guy named Kuasi, who runs muscle for APR. He gives Mercenary a test mission to recover a hostage from a small UFLL camp nearby. Turns out it's a girl who recognizes he has malaria, and her name is Flora Gullian, and later she points him to a man who might have pills for that. And later in the game, earning pills are like a side mission you need to do to stay sharp, so I'm not gonna get into that. But at this point, the pill guy tells him to go meet the priest if he's looking for malaria pills. And the priest's name is Ruben. He writes an article about the Jackal and he says soldiers confiscated his tapes with interviews. So he gives Mercenary the last tape and he shows it to priest and gets pills for malaria in return. Then he's introduced to Prosper Kuayasi. He tells him to assassinate the chief of police, and since he's a moving target riding in a motorcade, a mercenary picks up a spot on the road and waits for him. Also, Flora calls and wants to meet. She explains that the police chief's brother is hiding a ledger listing all the bribes taken from APR over the years and points where to find him. Mercenary finds him and steals the book. And that's how it works in this game with Flora and all the other friends you meet. They give you like alternative ways to finish a mission, but it doesn't affect the plot much. And in this case, Flora tells that the police chief will get scared when the bribe book will be stolen and he will hide in police station. And since his deputy hates him, when he is assassinated, he might give all the police weapons to UFLL, and Flora wants to ambush that convoy and destroy those weapons. She is right, and that's exactly what happens. Koyashi is impressed by that and he gives Mercenary another job. He is sent to blow up tank cars containing natural gas UFLL bought recently. So he goes to the railroad and takes out the natural gas with planted explosives. Then he sabotages the UFLL motor pool at the junkyard by destroying the compressor. Then the mercenary meets with Dr. Gakumba, the leader of UFLL, and does job for them. He destroys foreign commandos gear who were preparing to kidnap someone important, but UFFL doesn't want the outsiders to interfere in their war. Soon he is sent to free a hostage held by UFLL in the fishing camp. This guy introduces himself as Josip. Meanwhile, UFLL hires him to find King Niere's gold that is guarded by APR in the oasis. Then he gets briefed that APR is providing security for some European agribusiness. The company messes with the local ecosystem and APR protects their farms in exchange for food. So the point is that nobody is saint in this world and both organizations are worth each other, so playing on both sides, earning money and respect is just how mercenaries work. Mercenary finds the irrigation pumps between two greenhouses and destroys them. Since APR could not secure the farm, their deal with the company falls apart. After that, Leon Gakumba, leader of UFLL, asks to eliminate Kuayasi. Mercenary is informed that he is at the Goka Falls Lodge and he has only a few bodyguards there. He sneaks through the jungle and finds his way to Prosper Kuayasi, and he kills him, because that's what mercenaries do. And actually, since he is working for both sides, he gets two similar missions, and it depends on him whether he kills Kuayasi or Gakumba, but it's just a symbolic choice and it doesn't affect the plot, so let's stick to the UFLL side for a minute. So after the assassination, it turns out it was a setup and he is ambushed by gunmen who try to kill him. Once the mercenary escapes the ambush in Goka Falls, he will get a call from Ruben Oluwagembi, who tells him to meet up with him at the lumber mill outside Pala. Ruben informs of a massive offensive taking place in Leboa Sacco. Because of the assassination, the first target of the offensive is a mercenary himself, as well as all the other foreign mercenaries including his buddies. They are considered traitors and spies, and all the troops are going down to Mike's bar to kill them. Well, Mike's bar is a place you hang out and meet with your friends. You meet in the game, but they are not that important to the main plot. Up to this point, actually, where you have to make a choice what to do with them. But Ruben also says that the troops are going around and slaughtering civilians, and that when they reach Father Milia, all of the civilians he hides inside his church will probably be slaughtered. So since the mercenary has no time to save both groups of people, he has to choose between either going down to the church and defend the civilians, or to Mike's bar and fight alongside with his buddies. Well, honestly, regardless the choice, the mercenary is eventually overwhelmed and gunned down in the fighting. He wakes up on the back of a truck filled with the dead bodies, and it drives to a massive grave in the desert. The mercenary rolls off the back and then attempts to seek shelter in the sandstorm. When he finds one, he faints and reawakens. And guess who's back? Yeah, the Jackal. He's taking care after his wounds, actually. The Jackal then tells the mercenary how the UFLL celebrations will be bloody and how they will kill whatever civilians they found. Man, woman, children, you name it, they'll kill it. He describes the whole situation as a cancer and how in order to cure the disease, every cell must be destroyed on both sides. Then he hears a truck pulling in and says farewell to the mercenary again. A faction leader, Nick Graves of the APR, walks in and is astonished that the mercenary is still alive. He talks how his faction is retreating down south to Bova Seco and says that since mercenary is at his mercy, he has to kill the leader of the rival faction. The mercenary drives down to the troop rally and sees the faction leader that betrayed him standing on top of a truck, giving a celebratory speech to his troops. He attacks them and manages to kill Gakumba and his men. Later, Nick Graves explains a false flag operation in order to reignite the conflict. Faction leaders realize that if their higher up, Tambo-san, negotiates a peace deal, they will not only lose their jobs, but also lose their lives, as they would be blamed as the culprits of the conflict. Graves sends mercenary on a mission to meet up with another mercenary on the island in the lake south of Port Saelo and help him to escort a barge of weapons that the Jackal had hidden away right into Port Saelo itself. Mercenary meets up with Frank Builders and they manage to reach the port despite being under heavy fire. While Frank docks the boat down at the marine, mercenary warns the doctor of the incoming bloodbath. Gunfire and explosions can start to be heard outside. While in the doctor's office, mercenary meets Narcine, who warns him to leave through the back entrance instead of the front. It becomes clear that the mission is successful as the ceasefire in Port Salerno has been broken and both factions are battling it out in the streets over the mysterious weapons shipment. Once mercenary escapes the battle raging in the port, he gets a call from Frank Builders, who has been ambushed by enemy troops while docking the boat in the marina. Mercenary must help his buddy out and then he is free to do as he wishes from here. So he continues to hunt for the Jackal by doing missions for both factions, and in return he gets some information about the Jackal. It's mainly blowing up and stealing stuff, nothing that will push the plot forward, so I'm not gonna explain every single one of them. But it's worth to mention though that at one point he assassinates Seth Unia, who was training APR forces in bomb assembly and disposal. He also terminates their weapon broker Yabek. Soon the idea of a peace deal re-emerges among the factions and mercenaries sent by UFLL leader to deliver the message to Tambusa that he accepts his offer. In return, Tambusa gives him a big diamond. When the mercenary goes to retrieve the suitcase, he finds blood and bodies strewn about. And when he walks up to the room that the APR leader should be in, he finds him dead on the floor next to the diamond suitcase. The mercenary grabs the suitcase, but it's knocked to the floor by no one other than the Jackal himself. The Jackal tells him that he wants the war to continue as peace would only allow the faction leaders to commit crimes against their people without being under the public eye. The Jackal then knocks mercenary unconscious and walks off, leaving him to take the blame for all the mayhem he left behind. The mercenary wakes up in an old slave outpost and hears his body gets attacked. He eventually breaks out of the cell after he spots a weakness on one of the walls and escapes the outpost. Nick Graves calls and tells to meet him. Nick have now become the leader of APR because Oliver Tambosa have died. Nick tells to go and kill the other faction leader to help their faction grow stronger. Nothing we haven't done before, right? And you better get prepared for this switching the leader stuff by killing the current ones from now on. So later Nick wants to meet in the Mosate Selao office after the mission is done. Mercenary goes after UFLL leader and fights his way inside his safe house, killing him eventually, of course. When he returns to the Mosate Salo office, instead of Nick, there is Arturo Cuiepo. Arturo tells to go to Sepoko and kill Nick and Walton so that he can become a leader. Told ya. Mercenary has to decide who he wants to kill between Nick and Arturo. If he kills Arturo, it will set up a ceasefire. Right after the mission is completed, Ruben Oluwagambi calls, telling the mercenary to meet him at the marina. But he also tells him to be careful, since, quote, one of your friends is here. When he arrives, the friend turns out to be Anto. Also, Ruben tells him that people like him might have something terrible done to them soon, and that he will call if he needs help. After this, Anto, inspired by recent house cleaning at the APR, wants to kill Voorhees, and that way he will take over the organization. Yes, changing the leader by killing the current one. Still going on. Again, Mercenary can make a choice similar to the one he had at APR, but he decides to complete the mission. Ruben calls, telling to come to the airfield to help him, because he and some other journalists are under attack. Ruben is in a hangar surrounded by enemies. Mercenary saves their lives, pushing back the enemies. Ruben now can safely escape the country, but he decides to stay. He tells Mercenary that APR and UFLL have joined forces. Ruben tells him to go to the prison. There has been a riot there, and the Jackal should be there because he provoked it. Once Mercenary arrives at the prison, he meets Jackal. Turns out he has changed his views and he wants to end the war instead of supplying the militias with weapons to continue the conflict. He is already evacuating civilians across the border so he can isolate the militias in the country to destroy them without any casualties. So he has two requests. One is to retrieve some diamonds from a crash landing site, and the other is to kill the two lieutenants that are still alive in the jungle. Turns out that Jackal needs the diamonds to bribe the border guards so the civilians can escape from the country. Mercenary agrees to help him. When he gets to the crash landing site, he finds the diamonds along with his past allies, the friends from the bar. They express that they need the diamonds to leave the country via plane, and that they must kill him as they know he wants to use the diamonds for a different cause. Mercenary has a choice. He can run away or he can kill all his past allies. And we all know that the better choice for the plot is to kill all your fake friends and get the diamonds. And at the jungle, the two factions have united, and the place is under ceasefire, but there are many mercenaries there. At a small hut in the northern end, the two leaders are discussing stuff. Well, the mercenary goes there and kills them both. Then he meets with the Jackal, again at his hut. Jackal tells that APR and Front, you know, the UFLL, are still coming after the civilians near the border, so he plants some dynamite out there to cut the way for the soldiers to follow the refugees, but the explosives must be blasted via short circuit since the dead guns doesn't work. Classic. Well, long story short, it's a suicide mission. Jackal leaves Mercenary the choice. He can go there and detonate the stuff, or he can deliver the diamond to the border and bribe the guards. And this is a choice between a suicide mission and not suicide mission, so the choice, I guess, is easy. But listen to what Jackal says. He says that when the refugees are safely past the border, whoever went there to help them get through must put a bullet into his own head. Jackal considers them, you know, him and the mercenary, as part of the civil war problem and believes that the only way to destroy this cancer, and that includes both of them. Either way, whatever he chooses, the mercenary will sacrifice himself in the end. And that's, I guess, is the point of the game, because you done bad things, you were earning money on a war, playing both sides, now you have to sacrifice yourself to, like, I don't know why you have to do this, but he does so in order to allow over 2 million refugees to safely escape the country, poetically redeeming himself. The Jackal presumably dies as well, presumably, because we're not sure about that. In the aftermath, we learn that the unnamed African country, because that's where the story is taking place, unnamed African country, UAC, that's how they call it, this is cute, remains, and okay, so the unnamed African country remains at war once more because both factions were not able to form a government, so anarchy rules to this day. Ruben has published his story and it has been ignored, but he continues to publish it on his personal blog. And as for the mercenary, at least his exact fate remains unknown, so at least we don't have a scene where he sacrifices himself, so maybe he didn't, I don't know. That's how the game ends.